Oh, yeah, you guys are broadcasting. Hello, Top 100 Startups. How are you today? Thank you for joining us. We're honored to be joined by Alexander Jarvis today. He is the co-founder of, or not the co-founder, the founder of 50 Folds, which is a startup incubator, and he calls it anti-accelerator. So I think a good place to start is to kind of introduce what an anti-accelerator is and why there's the anti in front of it, because I think that's interesting and engaging.
Hey, what's up, guys? So I guess like a couple of years ago, was going through all the startup stuff and dealing with all the problems everyone had, and I just sort of thought that accelerators were BS. I mean, it's like if you need some support, like 3 months is not really going to cut it. It's like, yay, we'll go to demo day and like magically we're going to get funded somehow. And I was like, it's not kind of how it works.
Yeah.
So, my idea around an anti-accelerator was you kind of need an accelerator, but it needs to be the opposite of everything that an accelerator stands for. And so, as opposed to trying to do a demo day after 3 months, which is, just crazy. You do a fundraise process when the startup's actually ready for it and actually help people, get that done. Because let's face it, like fundraising is the biggest waste of time ever. You're just going out, spending maybe up to 6 months with hand in hat, or whatever, with a hat in your hand, like begging for cash. And it's just like a total waste of money and time. And so if you actually have someone who knows what to do because they're sad and they've learned about it, then you can just save like a ton of time. It's the same reason why I set up this website, 2 months called Perfect Pitch Deck. It's like, it's just nuts how much time founders waste doing pitch decks just to get money from investors. I mean, there's all these little tricks and things that investors want to know, and you don't know what they are. So should you really be wasting months trying to figure this stuff out? No, it's just like rubbish.
I love the pitch deck thing. Before, I'm just going to go into my own personal nerdom. How do you get those pitch decks? You just ask for permission and post them up, or are they publicly available? Or
it's taken me years. I don't share any pitch decks, which people send me, obviously, because that's, shady. But like I find them like all sorts of random places, like people post them on Twitter, or I'll go through like the archives of things and eventually get there. So I think I'm about 104 pitch decks now.
So first softball question then, what's the, after you've seen 104, so is there one takeaway for startups that they should do, and then the flip side of the most common mistakes that ruins a pitch deck immediately?
It's not one thing, it's a lot of things. The core thing is tell a story, and like before you go writing a pitch deck, this is what I'm going nuts telling everyone to do now, is just bust open Word, insert a bullet point, and start writing the whole story you want to tell in bullet points, like max 15 words. And you'll end up with, say, maybe 15 bullet points, and then just transpose that into your pitch deck. So each bullet point is the slide, and then like press down and just read the header. Does that like tell your story? And then just make the content support the header that you just did. And if you do that, you'll save a ton of time and at least end up telling a story to investors. And it's just so much more simple if you approach it that way, rather than just looking at Dave McClure's guide or Sequoia's guide, where it's like problem, solution, market sizing, and just randomly trying to just force yourself to fill this in. And that, I think, is just one of the sources of frustrations, that you think you got to fill in these slides, but you don't know why. Whereas if you just decided what the story you want to communicate and make it your own, it's just a hell of a lot easier.
I listened to a founder recently who part of her pitch deck was hiring employees, and it stood out because no one else does that. They're always, hat in hand investment stuff. So I kind of understand what you're saying.
What do you mean?
Oh, like part of her pitch was there was, let's say there's 8 pitches, 7 of them were all the same to each other. And hers was, she introduced her company, and then she spent 3 sides saying, we're looking for a product developer, we're looking for a COO, and we're looking for a, and it wasn't really about a call out for some random amount of VC funding. It was more specific, and I don't know if it worked or not, but at least it was interesting, which is also important, I think.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of people looking for money, so at least get noticed. And just chucking it out there, like if you're going to demo days, like E27's demo day, I can honestly tell you, quite often the people that win are the people that suck the least. So
Yeah.
like if you can go out and just have fun and not be boring, then you're the person that's going to get noticed, because so many people are stressed out about it and taking it way too seriously. But if you just like let rip and just share the passion that you have out of it, people will buy into it. I mean, most people's lives are boring. So if you come out there like the Energizer Bunny, people kind of want to be part of your reality.
And then I want to remind some of the viewers that are in here, we have a bunch of questions online that we have previously on E27, but if you would like to ask on this YouTube link, I have it open so I can kind of hijack this conversation and ask your questions, because this is meant for you more than myself. And then one more I wanted to ask because I'm hosting, so that's my reward. What about angel investing, and are there any, I guess, specific pitfalls from startups when they should be looking for angel investing and approaching the term sheet? So let me just guide you with this debate that I saw in Quora, which was, there was an angel investor. He's investing a significant amount of money. Let's say it's like $200,000 into a founder, and this is their first capital that they've ever seen. So they haven't raised anything. But the angel investor wants 51% stake in the company.
Okay, I saw that post before.
Is that a good deal?
I saw that post, I think, 2 days ago. I didn't bother answering it. It's not a good deal. I mean, first off, 51% of your company is basically making you an employee.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have any control. If that's your first round of capital. Okay, so this typically happens in a certain country in Asia, and founders just totally get taken advantage of. So it does happen. And then what happens is, at the next stage of funding, say seed, if you somehow get there, the investors take one look at your cap table and say it's a word beginning with F, and your options basically there are not getting funded, bootstrapping, or doing what you call like a recap, so recapitalizing the cap table, which is enormously painful. So you, like, the potential lead investor will go talk to the angels and say, guys, no one is going to fund this unless you get seriously crammed down, like to say 20, 25%, which is probably what they should have been in the first place anyway. They'll hum and haw, but basically realize that unless they're going to pony up the rest of the funding for the company, it's just not going to happen. So you should never accept 51% dilution when you're doing any round, other than an acquisition, which is basically what it is. It's effective control. So the typical ranges that you're going to have in a fundraising are anything between, say, 10% if you're slack and 40% if you're severely taking advantage of. But it's typically, you should expect 20 to 25% dilution in sort of any given round. And if you're sort of deviating from that, then there's an issue, which actually leads on to point that, you know, VCs asking you what your valuation is sort of a dumb question.
I was actually
the better way to approach it, right, is how much are you fundraising? Like, how much do you actually need? And what is the logic of how much you're raising for? And then what dilution are you actually willing to tolerate? Since, you know, that's something you can decide to walk away from or accept, right? And, you know, literally, if you just divide the amount of money you're raising by your dilution, you kind of effectively set your valuation, right? Yeah, so valuations in startup land for early stage is just, it's BS. It's sort of,
yeah, I mean, it's a way for investors to make money, right? But for the startup, they can kind of trip over some wires there.
Yeah, there's all sorts of sneaky things that investors can potentially do. And, you know, like, yeah, you know, if you're doing, like, say, Series A, there's all sorts of tricksy things that they can do in their term sheets. And, you know, they'll whisper sweet nothings into your ear and walk you through the term sheet about how they're about to abuse you and make you think that they're not actually, you know, going to. And I said in, like, this one pitch to, like, a sort of quasi PE company in Singapore, and I just, like, I was laughing so much because this partner was just going to abuse this founder with terms. So that's another thing, guys. Like, valuation is one thing, and yeah, you care about it, but like the terms can really bite you in your ass if you're not careful about it.
What are some terms, specific terms to really watch out for?
Well, the obvious one is the most obvious one you'll think about is, say, liquidation preference. And it's like, okay, what's the liquidation preference? And well, sorry, let's take a step back. All the terms in a term sheet is basically a pre-conversation between the investor and the founder, and say, if things go wrong, we've agreed right now how we're going to deal with it. Okay, so all those legal jargon stuff is basically about managing the downside, right? It's not about like we'll give you like bottles and models if you win, right? It's about what we're going to do if things go wrong. And so liquidation preference would be the first one, and that basically says last money in, first money out. So if I give you $5 million, okay, if you sell for $5 million, the investor is going to take all of that money. Right.
Yeah.
And it's only if his equivalent, I don't want to get too nerdy here, but it's only if the amount, if he converted his preference share, or got rid of his preference and then diluted into common, would you actually start making any money yourself. And so that's basically liquidation preference. And then you can have all these anti-dilution sort of related clauses like ratchets, which basically say if you do down rounds, things are going to go very, very bad for you. That, for example, happened to Square when they did their IPO. They did some crazy terms prior to their fund before the IPO, and they did less than the private round, and the founders lost quite a lot of equity.
Cool. Let's go to a live question since we got since that's the AMA. So if you have options between a few investors, how do you decide between who you want on your cap table? This is from Fu Fei, so thank you.
Hey, Fu Fei. Okay, it's going to sound like a weird one to say, but I would pick someone you like. You know, someone you think that's actually going to have your back, because startup really sucks, and it's a really long journey. So if you don't like your investor and you're thinking, oh, just get this dude to give me some cash, yay. All right, is he really going to have your back when things don't go well, which they probably aren't at some point? You know, if they have to make a really tough call because you're what they call a sideways deal, like you're not doing really well, will they step up to the plate and give you more money to help you get to that next round? Will they do like a bridge or extension to your Series A to kind of really help you there? And so, you know, people that you like, that you think are trustworthy, really matters, because, you know, getting funded is really actually like a marriage. Like you cannot, but it's worse than a marriage. You can't even divorce your investor. They're stuck there. You know, you're stuck with them. And if anything, you're the one that can get fired. So do you actually trust your investors? Because the only real lever that they have to control your startup is firing you, you know, controlling who the CEO is. So that matters. Do they have money to do follow-ons? You want to be really clear about what their plan is, how much dry powder they have in the fund. So you either want to be really clear that they have no more money and you're not getting any more, or they have money and they'll fund you if you achieve certain milestones, right? So angels is easy, right? If you get funded an angel round and then you go to your seed round, you know, the seed round guys may say, hey, are your angel investors going to do their pro rata, which means, you know, maintain their stake in the company, or not, or put anything in, and you can just say, look, my guys are broke, that they can't give any more money, right? That's clear. But if, you know, your investors know that your investors have money and they're not giving it to you, that's really bad signal. And it can end up actually just basically making you unfundable. And so you'll have to, you know, if your investors are not going to do the pro rata in the follow-on round, you basically have to come up with an elaborate lie and get the investors to go along with it. Otherwise, you're not getting funded, because all the future investors are going to assume that the existing investors know way more than they ever will, and they'll just kind of follow what they sort of see. So, you know, pick someone that you like, have a real clear plan about how you're going to do things with it, figure out, do they have money? Do they not have more money? And then, you know, check their terms. Like, are their terms reasonable or not? If they try to do sneaky stuff with you, you know, that's sort of a dick move. And so, you know, if you take their money and go with it and they do some shady stuff to you in future, you sort of were asking for it because you knew they were going to do it, right?
Yeah. I wanted to follow up on the dry powder comment you made, because there's a lot of smaller, not smaller, but interesting people now in Asia starting their own VCs, but they obviously on their maiden fund aren't going to be raising $1 billion or whatever. So how do you approach, let's say you do like the VC, you do like the investor, but they have, I don't know, a $10 million fund. How do you approach someone like that in terms of bringing them on board, but also, like you said, making sure you don't get screwed later because they don't have enough money to follow on and then you're unfundable?
Have the chat up front, right? So The way it works is you're going to go pitch all the VCs, and you basically have no power because they don't care about you until they do. All right, and once they care about you, you have a little bit of control because you can sort of pick who you want, right? And I'll be honest with you, like the best deals are actually competitive. The VCs are vying for your attention, so it's not always like a one-sided race. The best deals actually get competed for, so you can actually have some control over that once they're interested. Okay, and so if you're sort of selecting through who you want to be your investor, have an honest conversation with them and interview them. Don't just let them interview you. No, you can sit back and say, okay, tell me, Jim, why should I take your money? What value are you going to bring to me? You know, there's a bunch of great investors who've got interest in us. What will you do for me? You know, I think there was some movie where I'm not going to answer it anyway. So there's a list of questions that you may not actually have any more money to commit. So if they had a $40 million fund, they may have blown through, you know, 30, 20. And assuming that they're going to put in half of their fund into following on into companies, that could actually mean they got no more money to actually invest in you, or they haven't allocated any more to do follow-ons for you. So being, you know, ask them like, how much money do you have left in your fund? What amount of dry powder? Do you have enough to allocate to me? Are you going to do pro ratas? Do you do follow-ons? You know, how I saw someone ask a question later on, but you know, are you a lead investor? There are very, very few lead investors around. The reason for that being that you actually have to have conviction and believe in the investments that you want to make as a lead investor. Yeah.
Yeah, let's answer that question. How would you determine whether an investor is usually a lead investor if you're new to the startup?
The short answer, there's very few lead investors in Asia. Okay. The vast majority of VCs are sheep. Right? They just want to see what everyone else is doing and sort of offset the risk or the bet, or you know, that mental incongruencies in their head by someone else making it cool, right? Which is why you always see like angels, etc., say, "So who else is investing?" Because everyone else thinks that everyone else has put in like a whole bunch of work doing due diligence and figuring out the market and all this kind of stuff, which in reality no investor really wants to do. So they think if someone else is doing it, that they've magically done the work, and actually that's BS. So there's an example of a big, well, sort of, you know, technically a unicorn in the UK. And, you know, this multi-billion-dollar fund invested in this company. And my friend at a family office, you know, participated in the round. And she told me after the company blew up in flames that they just assumed this multi-billion-dollar under management company had done a bunch of due diligence, right? So why should they? And, you know, that big company hadn't done any due diligence at all. So, you know, there is an amazing amount of just like following what other people do and hoping somehow other people know what they're doing. So the only way to really tell is, you know, check E27, etc., funding announcements and see who actually leads the deals.
I like the check E27 advice.
No, exactly, right. But like, you know, let's say like Jungle led the whatever, or Monks Hill, or Sequoia led, or that, you know, you can kind of guess who the main guys are going to be. So you've got, you know, like the Pauls at Wavemakers and the Vinnies and Jeffries at the Golden Gates and Koyi and Peng at Monks Hill and, you know, Amit and Co. and Chireo at Seed Plus. You know, these are the typical guys in the region who are going to lead your rounds. Everyone else is mainly going to participate. Okay, of course, you've got all the guys like East Ventures, etc., which are great, but there's actually very few lead investors in the region, and there's sort of a good reason for that. So, you know, stick to the best guys that you can find and then sort of filter your way down to everyone else over time.
Cool. And then Fufei had another follow-up, which was, is it fair to ask investors kind of their long-term plans for what they want to do with your startup? I think we kind of already, Fu, I think we kind of already talked to the second one, which was how much money they have left.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask them how much money they have left. But what are your plans? Okay, so you're going to build your startup for basically minimum of 7 years unless you die, which is statistically likely, actually, unfortunately. So it's important to have like an aligned vision of what you want to achieve. So, if you want to build, ultimately build like an enterprise company, and they don't want you to do that, they just want you to be SME, then you're naturally going to hit heads on this, right? So if they don't buy into that vision that you have, they're not the right investor for you. And actually, I'm kind of frankly surprised that they want to invest in your startup, because ultimately, all they're buying into you and your team and your vision. That's all they're buying into, especially at the early stage. So just make sure you got alignment on that, and so they'll back you, because otherwise your board meetings, etc., they're going to constantly be fighting with you, and you're just going to hate your life and wonder why you're putting up with all this stuff. So just always have honest conversations with people, be upfront, share your logic, and take people into that thinking process with it, so that they can buy into it.
Cool. So Victor Zhang kind of tells a bit of a story, but I'll just read it. Should we open ourselves up to negotiation on the company valuation at the early stage, seed, pre-A, angel? We have some investors trying to negotiate about the price. We said no directly and closed the conversation. Do they really care about the difference between 6 million in valuation and 3 million, or are they just not keen in the startup?
Yes, people do care about your valuation. The impact of like 1 million on your pre can actually have a meaningful impact on your ROI, actually. There was some paper I read years ago which actually gave you like the statistical difference on like a 1 million difference. So for really early stage stuff, especially people who don't have much money, there is a lot of price sensitivity, and you'd be stupid to assume that there's not. You just think, oh, well, imaginary number is 3, 5, 6, 10, so just pick numbers out of a hat. It does actually make a difference to the returns on investors, especially if they don't have very much money. So I can honestly tell you at the early stage, almost every investor is probably going to ask you what your valuation is, just to figure out like if you're being cray-cray or not. So if you are like 1K MRR, like one man and his dog in his garage, right? And you say, yeah, my pre is like 20 million. It's like, what a waste of time. Like, no one's going to fund you at 20 million. So you're just totally wasting that guy's time, whereas if your valuation was like 1 million or 2 million or something, it doesn't have to be the specific number, but at least in the ballpark, it's reasonable, then fine. Though it's worth them spending time on you. But bear in mind, like, investors don't have much time, so they're going to pre-filter you to decide where they want to spend their time and resources. Really following down the rabbit hole with a startup. So if someone asks you your valuation, don't just like shut down the conversation and like disappear. That's totally not common sense. People are going to ask you to figure out like, are you being reasonable or not? If you don't want to give a specific number, you can say, look, we're looking for investors who are going to, appreciate the value that we've created so far. I think our terms are going to be pretty standard, and I think those should align with what's going on in the market. So we're not looking for any crazy numbers. So don't worry about that. We'll be reasonable about it. So you can do some kind of waffle around that, just pretend like you know what you're talking about a little bit, and not give a number. But I wouldn't recommend throwing your toys out of the pram and walking out of the meeting. It's just not going to do any good. The variance in valuation actually does make it a difference to investors.
We have 2 questions from Sejun King about ICOs. This one's kind of a bit more broad. But how do VCs view startups that are either have fundraised through an ICO or are seriously considering fundraising through an ICO?
I can honestly tell you that quite a lot of startups who've from Asia who've reached out to me, once I sort of get on the phone and interrogate them a little bit, they'll be honest that the only reason they're doing an ICO is that VCs wouldn't fund them.
Yeah.
That's kind of the reality. I mean, of course, you got all these starry-eyed developer types who are just decentralized internet, and they really believe in this stuff. But for the most part, people just see this bubble and they're like, I want to get on this. Of course, no one will admit to it being a bubble, or the fact that it doesn't make sense, or that no one really understands any of this and what the implications are. Or they don't even believe that they get technically diluted by having an ICO, which is actually false. So people don't really understand what's going on here. So I just read this morning that in 2017, I think there's a 70% failure rate for ICOs. Just FYI. So I think 230 million has already been disappeared from just last year. Anyway, so the whole ICO thing, if your token is fundamental to your business model, then it makes sense. Like a great example of that is gaming, right?
Yeah.
You have like a virtual currency. So I've got a mate in London who, I don't know, he raised a reasonable amount, like 6 to 10 million or something, like, you know, reasonable money. So he set this up for his game, and you have to buy one of the tokens in order to get like special weapons. And so there's only so many like gold tokens, and you can only get them by buying into that. And so his ICO, his tokens are effectively the currency for his in-game. And so that actually it actually makes sense. So I think for startups like that, it'll make sense. I think if you are just doing an ICO because you kind of want to hustle and get some money and buy into this bubble, I think you're going to get bitten in the ass. And I'm pretty sure that everything is going to get regulated properly as a security. There's no way it's going to exist in the way it currently is. So, you know, feel free to do it. I mean, VC stuff, I mean, we've got various people who have funds to invest in this stuff, and they may think they kind of know what's going on. I personally am too stupid to really understand it. And I think the whole area is pretty scary. It's basically just speculative trading. So you can invest pre, and then you just get out and hope that the token price doesn't tank before you get there. I don't see how like the long-term appreciation works out for a VC. I mean, the benefit, of course, is that you have liquidity and it don't have the lockup. But you know, why is it that a VC has privileged access to deals? I guess is the ultimate point. Like, why do you want to pay management fees to a company to invest in ICOs if you could do it yourself? I don't know.
Yeah, I was curious if you think investors run away from startups after they've done the ICO, or if they. I guess I'm wondering, and I don't know the answer to this question, is if you go through an ICO, is if you burn the bridges to later walk back and be like, oh, I'm sorry, VCs, come fund me. But I guess if your company is interesting enough, they'll always come.
But the thing is, right, this ICO is basically saying goodbye to your company, okay? You've basically IPO'd. Like, your company is now on a token. You don't technically own shares of your own company. It's owned by other people. And so, you know, your ICO is a dilutive round. There's only so many tokens. You know, you put them out there, maybe you have some reserves, but you've basically just IPO'd your company. You know, you can't just suddenly, you know, go, oh, I changed my mind, I want to, you know, become normal again. It doesn't really work that way. And, you know, like with investors, like if you're getting a 50% discount or whatever it is on the token price that goes public, if you will, that's like a 50% ROI for like 1 month's work. You know, why the hell would you hold on to that? That's like bloody brilliant for 1 month. Like, yeah, amazing.
Quick left turn. So how do you deal with investors? How do you deal with a nightmare investor situation? So things work great for 6 months, and then Bridezilla becomes an issue, and how do you deal with it as a founder without getting yourself fired?
Is there a specific stage?
Let's say pre-Series A. When you're much more stable or unstable, maybe you only have 5 or 6 employees at the most.
So they come at like a seed extension or like a pre-A round. Frankly, that's sort of like your bad. You should do due diligence on your investors before you take them. So, you know, you can ask them for like a list of founders for you to talk to. Of course, they're going to tell you the ones which, you know, will say positive things. And then you want to go off list and just contact people and do background checks on your investors too. And actually like take it seriously, because bad investors can really make life hell. So for example, I've got a friend in Europe who's pretty well known. She did an angel round and had this one sort of super angel in a way who was going to, you know, effectively run a syndicate and, you know, give her quite a large chunk of change. But this guy was just a super pain in the ass. Like he was like constantly wanting to get involved in the business and sort of micromanage things and like get her to change things. And she was just like, oh my God. And this is just like after a week of getting the deal done. And so the first thing she was doing is like, how can I get rid of this person? I think she was able to get rid of him just because I don't think they'd signed or something. But they really can be a major pain in your ass. The problem is you basically can't get rid of them. You can come to agreement where you can buy them out, but it is very difficult to get rid of them. So if they're investing on a convertible note, that's easier. But if you do a priced round and they're getting actual shares in your company, they own shares in your company, and it's sort of like tough luck. So the only thing you can kind of do is say, look, we're going to quit unless you get bought out. And depending is you may be able to take money from the next round of investors to buy out your investors, or, you know, it's effectively a secondary where they're buying out the shares from them. But it's just very hard to get rid of investors once they're on your cap table. And frankly, if they're a bit annoying, then maybe they did some dodgy things on your terms, they may have a right of refusal to any new investors. So they could basically block any new investor coming on your cap table, which basically means they're the only source of future money. Okay. And then they can keep on down rounding you and end up giving you like 100K for 50% of your company or something. And then just ending up taking every company. And there's a couple of startups in Asia where this has happened to, where the investors have basically hijacked the company.
Wow.
The stuff happens.
And then I guess, yeah, I mean, it's all due diligence beforehand. You try to make a power play, I guess, but if that backfires and they say, go ahead, quit, then I guess it's move on to a different industry.
Yeah, it's serious. I mean, I know everyone wants to get money, but you have to take who your investors are really seriously. I mean, there's a lot of good guys around, and those are the guys who are going to be around for a while. But if you come across some guys who you think are a bit shady or no one's really heard of them, then you know what? There's a good reason to be sketchy. So I mean, I can give you a real example. This guy, I did a fundraise for one of my friends in Asia, and we had this guy from Europe, and I did some Googling, and the guy was like wanted. He was at one point wanted by the FBI, right? Oh, no. And he had this like mansion with like 16 AK-47s in there, and like for crashing Ferraris and shit. I was like, who the fuck is this guy? And like, I don't know, I can't remember if he went to prison or not or something, but he had a bunch of money, but like there was some really shady stuff that had gone on in the past. And, he was like this consummate salesperson, and it was like, oh my God, he sounds awesome and he's going to add so much value. And it was just like all freaking lies. So yeah, if people seem a bit shady, like do some work and figure out who they are, because there's normally good reasons why you haven't heard of someone.
Just a couple more. Let's do one more semi-serious one. So hi Alex, when evaluating startups, what qualities of the founders and or the team would you consider red flags? So more about the startups and the investors.
When evaluating founders, what are red flags? I mean, the most annoying thing someone can do is I'll quit my job and after you funded me. If you haven't quit your job already to do your startup, it's like, dude, just don't even bother fundraising. There's just no way anyone's going to take you seriously. So that's pretty stupid. Single founders, I have a bit of an issue with, especially if you don't have a quality team, because getting a quality co-founder is really hard. If you don't have a team, you can kind of forget it, because if you haven't convinced someone to quit their job to join you, like, are you really going to be able to convince lots of customers to pay you? Are you really going to be able to convince like investors to be funding you? It's sort of tricky. And also, like, if you have been able to get like really high people to quit their jobs to join you, it's also indicative of your network. And so like it or not, like having a network is actually really important. So from business development deals to hiring people to, X, Y, and Z, having a network or, being within an industry is really advantageous. If you're building like a new vertical, then not being a veteran of the industry is not so much of a big issue. But, would you rather back someone who knew everyone and knew everything about an industry, or someone who was like, oh, I like Beanie Babies and I'm going to sell Beanie Babies or something? It's just you want to back people who really know what they're doing and are just going to dominate. So if you want to come back from another point of view and just say, like, what is the ideal founder and investor would want to invest in? Like, think about it yourself. I mean, they're going to have a certain level of maturity. Maybe they've done some startup before. Maybe they've worked for corporate before. They've got a big network. Maybe they don't have kids, but I guess I can't talk about that. They work their ass off. They've got a crazy work ethic. They've got like an infectious enthusiasm and passion about what they're doing, right? And then you take the opposite of that, and that's like all the flags. Like they're doing something they don't know about. It's like, oh, I saw like some food delivery company in America, and so I'm just going to copy that for Singapore. It's like, why? Because it seems to kind of work in America, but it's like, but it works in Singapore. I don't know, but it works well in America. It's like, that's a terrible idea to do a startup, right? And so like, you know, like really, like knowing what they're doing, why they're doing it, that they're thesis driven. You know, they're not. I mean, they're passionate about what they're solving, but they're actually also realistic about it. It's like, here are our metrics. Here's a thesis about why this will work, and I'm constantly validating all these things. And if they don't work, I'm going to reevaluate them, right? So I'll say, do you know what? If we're going to try doing paid as our main, driver of growth, I believe for this to work, I need to have a CPC of between like $0.5 and $0.7 and a conversion rate of like 1%. Okay, and if you go out and test that and it doesn't work, then what do? You're going to like quit and cry? Like, no, you're going to have to then augment that and maybe have like viral driver growth or like organic word of mouth, etc., and be able to adjust and shift to what you're doing. So like really understanding and being like thesis driven, I think, is really important, and really knowing your metrics. So if you're a pitching investor and you don't know your numbers when you get asked, it's a really bad flag. So like, what is your CAC? What is your LTV? If you're not sure what your LTV is, do you at least know how to calculate it? Do you have a theory about what it is, or at least what it takes for you to work? Do you like
ultimately questions are coming?
Sorry?
And to know that those questions are coming.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, investors are going to always ask you basically the same questions. Yeah, there may be some weird ones, but ultimately, like, if you actually know your business, you can answer any questions. So just like relax and don't stress out about it. But you need to do your work. It's like one question I answered last night on Quora was actually around financial models. Someone said, do I need to really? Everyone knows that numbers and models are BS. Why do I need to do it? Is it not a waste of time? And so what I actually said to this guy was like, look, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So if you actually methodically go through a proper fundraising model, it'll force you to answer a lot of questions you may not have considered, okay? And it'll force you to think about all the different aspects of what works, what doesn't work, right? So what are the components of your marketing, from social and blogging to email to SEO to paid to affiliates to direct sales, or however you're doing it? Like what will work, what kind of won't work, right? When you think about the components of your COGS, or your OPEX, or how you're doing customer care, you can be light touch to low touch, to high touch, etc. What can you actually afford? It's like you need to understand what variables will actually work for ultimately two things: your CAC and your LTV. How much do you acquire customers for? How much do you make out of them? And I do the payback time. Like, how long does it take for you to convert those customers into profitable? Because that basically generates a flywheel where you can afford to then keep on acquiring more customers. And so like your whole model then comes down to those things, but you have to understand the key drivers of what your model is to know if your business will actually work. And like, seriously, guys, I know everyone is like fixated on fundraising, but you're starting up to cash out, not to raise, right? Like, your goal is not to get money from investors. Your goal is to get really rich, right? And famous, and whatever it like motivates you. So if your business model does not have fundamentals, like, why are you bothering? If you want to build a startup which doesn't make sense, like, go to America. At least there's like a pool of acquirers who might, bail you out with an acqui-hire or something. There is not like this crazy big pool of acquirers in Asia, like waiting in line to kind of hoover up talent. It's not like that. In Asia, you have to actually build a business model with fundamentals that make sense and really win. And you can win. I mean, like Anthony at Grab, etc., is doing fab. He may even be buying Uber allegedly. So you can do cool things if you've got the right timing, etc. But Asia's not the right place to kind of just do some BS which doesn't make sense, because it's just not going to work out for you, and you're going to end up broke, and that sucks.
Cool. So you've been here for about 40 minutes already. Let's end on a lighter question. Would you consider shows like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank good for startups to learn from?
That's reality TV. It's not real life, right? I mean, the only things you're really going to pick up from that is how would you deal with stress and having a hard time, because investors are not going to be that hostile to you in the real world, because they'll come across as dicks and it's bad for their reputation, and a lot of people want to be perceived as nice guys, basically. You can kind of think about how you'd respond to it. You can pick up on how stupid people look if they don't know their revenue numbers. It's like, so what will your revenue be in 2019? You're like, oh, wait, no, I know this one. Just give me a minute. You look like a total, a jerk, right? So you can pick up on like what not to do, but you're not really going to learn what to do. I mean, it's better than, watching Neighbors or EastEnders or something. But, if you really want to learn, there's better, read long form blogs. There's a bunch of really, fantastic bloggers these days. Like, you'll find everyone on Medium, right? You'll see what is the most liked, and, read that content, or follow, get the newsletter from, say, Strictly VC, or the Madam Mark newsletter is fantastic, and read like the long form content there, and because it's just bloody brilliant. If you want to get into nerdy stuff, watch YouTube. If you just want to watch stuff and not read, right? There are, you'll find like SaaStr, or the various conferences that go on, and you'll find some people do like really kick-ass talks, and they're really informative and engaging, and you'll actually learn something pragmatic and interesting there. But basically, yeah, I mean, this Dragon's Den or your whatever the thing is called again, Shark Tank, it's not really designed for you. It's designed for mass market. So it's better than EastEnders, but it's not as good as finding quality content from, say, a conference on YouTube.
Awesome. And I want to wrap up with my one question is, what do you personally want to see in like a year from the Southeast Asia startup, early stage startup scene?
Well, I'd like to see exits, because that's good for everyone, right?
More stupid startups that get bought by
well, no, I mean, quality companies, like ideally like deep tech, unless it's like consumer stuff, which I just find tedious. I mean, there's still people setting up food delivery companies, whatever, like God bless, but just, it's not fun. I actually even know that there's some VCs planning on quitting because they're bored of all these consumer, like, low level stuff. It's not deep tech enough. Actually, one of my mates quit last week, actually, because he was bored of it. I'd love to see some more like deep tech stuff. I know like SG Innovate and stuff have been doing some pretty cool things to try and promote like the AI ecosystem. It's obviously still early days, but like it's not like people are dumb in Asia. We just, the ecosystem only really started at 2013. So I kind of fundamentally believe it's just like a limiting belief. Like no one's seen someone have massive success yet, and so once someone just like sucks it up and really puts in the hustle and gets by and has a really big exit, I think it'll be like a lighthouse moment for the whole of Southeast Asia. Like Yossi Vardi was in Israel when he had his ICQ moment. Or like Roger Bannister when he did the 4-minute mile, everyone realized you could actually break the 4-minute barrier. So I'd love to see some more like deep tech things. I'm really looking forward to someone having like a really big success and like inspiring everyone, and being able to tell their Asian parents that being a founder is not like a terrible thing. So I'd really like to see that. Some more deep tech would be cool. Yeah, I mean, like, or even some innovation would be really cool, as opposed to I'm copying something in America. So like, yeah, and also like, if you do like some innovative stuff and you can hire some really cool tech people, they're totally investors who want to back you, because that's actually what they're interested in doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. Awesome, Alex. Thanks for your time this morning for you.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us. We'll have follow up with you if you have questions and anything. So appreciate your time, and I learned quite a bit, and I hope that the viewers did as well.
Cool. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.